Week 8, Truth, Justice, and Righteousness. Page 57 in your books. The place of the passage. Moses' core emphasis remains the same as it has been. Israel must be holy, set apart from the nations. But whereas 12:1 through 16:17 was primarily about holiness in worship, now he shows how Israel must be different in their government, explaining godly ideals for 4 different kinds of leaders: judges, priests, kings, and prophets. We also hear about cities of refuge, a protection for those who kill a person accidentally, laws of warfare, and the process for atoning for unsolved murders. The rallying cry for this portion of Deuteronomy is justice, and only justice. The land may be a paradise of good food and wealth, but the people are still tainted by sin, and Deuteronomy shows how God has appointed leaders to restrain wickedness through just consequences. The big picture? The Lord entrusts Israel's rulers with the crucial task of implementing justice and righteousness in the land. And we're on to page 58 and to the study. Looking at number 1, just judges, and I'm going to read for you in just a moment. Deuteronomy 16:18 through 20. You've got your Bible, you can read along. I'm using the New International Version. It says, when the judges hand down a judgment, they express God's authority, and they represent him to the people. In Deuteronomy 16:18 through 20, what practices does Moses warn about that would subvert justice? Well, let's hear it. Deuteronomy 16:18 through 20. Appoint judges and officials for each of your tribes in every town the Lord your God is giving you, and they shall judge the people fairly. Do not pervert justice or show partiality. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. Follow justice and justice alone, so that you may live and possess the land the Lord your God is giving you. So the question, what practices does Moses warn about that could subvert justice? Don't pervert justice. Don't show partiality. Don't take a bribe. And the reminder that we should follow justice and justice alone. Following on, due process. And this is one of those few times where we're looking at 2 different places of Deuteronomy instead of going in complete chronological order here. So it's going to be 17:2 through 13 and 19:15 through 21. Legal cases can appear clear-cut when they're really not. And many may believe a case will lead to a certain conviction when the accused is actually innocent. Due process protects the accused from drummed-up charges and false witnesses and gives a chance for truth to prevail. What safeguards do these 2 texts prescribe to protect Israelites from injustice? 17:2 through 13. If a man or a woman living among you in one of the towns the Lord gives you is found doing evil in the eyes of the Lord your God, in violation of his covenant, and contrary to my command, has worshipped other gods, bowing down to them, or to the sun, or the moon, or the stars of the sky, and this has been brought to your attention, then you must investigate it thoroughly. If it is true, and it's been proved that this detestable thing has been done in Israel, take the man or woman who has done this evil deed to your city gate and stone that person to death. Wow. On the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, a man shall be put to death, but no one shall be put to death on the testimony of only 1 witness. The hands of the witnesses must be the first in putting him to death. You must purge the evil from among you. Verse 8, If cases come before your courts that are too difficult for you to judge, whether bloodshed, lawsuits, or assaults, take them to the place the Lord your God will choose. Go to the priests who are Levites, and to the judge who is in the office at that time. Inquire of them, and they will give you a verdict. You must act according to the decisions they give you at the place the Lord will choose. Be careful to do everything they direct you to do. Act according to the law that they teach and the decisions they give. Do not turn to the right or to the left. The man who shows contempt for the judge or for the priest who stands ministering there to the Lord your God must be put to death. You must purge the evil from Israel. All the people will hear and be afraid and will not be contemptuous again. And then jumping over to chapter 19, verses 15 through 20. One witness is not enough to convict a man accused of any crime or offense he may have committed. A matter must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If a malicious witness takes the stand to accuse a man of a crime, the 2 men involved in the dispute must stand in the presence of the Lord before the priest and the judges who are in the office at the time. The judges must make a thorough investigation, and if the witness proves to be a liar, giving false testimony against his brother, then do to him as he intended to do to his brother. You must purge the evil from among you. The rest of the people will hear of this and be afraid, and never again will such an evil thing be done among you. Show no pity, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. What safeguards do these 2 texts prescribe to protect Israelites from injustice? Well, there must be 2 or more witnesses. One's never enough. Those witnesses must also be the first to kill the accused. Think about that. If a case is too difficult, take it to the priest who will judge, and you must follow exactly what they say. If a single witness is found lying, do to him what he wanted done to the accused. Boy, that would make you think twice about lying and making up some charges falsely about somebody, wouldn't it? Number 3, the king after God's own heart. Back to chapter 17, verses 14 through 20. When you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you and have taken possession of it and settled in it, and you say, let us set a king over us like the nations around us. Be sure to appoint over you the king the Lord your God chooses. He must be from among your brothers. Do not place a foreigner over you, one who is not a brother Israelite. The king, moreover, must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself, or make the people return to Egypt, or get more of them. For the Lord has told you, you are not to go back that way again. He must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. When he takes the throne of his kingdom, he is to write for himself on a scroll a copy of this law, taken from that of the priests who are Levites. It is to be with him. He's to read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God and follow carefully all the words of this law and these decrees, and not consider himself better than his brothers and turn from the law to the right or to the left. Then he and his descendants will reign a long time over his kingdom in Israel. What temptations will the king face, and what antidote does Moses offer for these temptations? Then comes a surprising use of this phrase, for himself. Well, he has temptations of wealth, fame, lording it over others, right? If you become the king, all of these things all of a sudden become available to you. And he is to copy the law himself. He is supposed to write it out. Rewrite it for himself, not just get a copy from the library. And then he is to read it daily, every day. And then he's to live it out. That sounds like good advice for us with the scriptures, doesn't it? That will help him have a heart after God and be a righteous king, to not take in all the ways of the world that are offered him, and to be in God's word daily. Provision for the Levites, 18:1 through 8. Levites have special roles in Israel, including care for the tabernacle, stewardship of God's word, rendering of judgment. But even though the Levites do not work the ground, Deuteronomy repeatedly insists, especially in this passage, that the Levites have a right to receive the produce of the land like the rest of Israel. Why, according to this passage, is God so concerned that the Levites receive the produce of the ground? And when it gives a reference of Nehemiah 13:10, where it talks about a portion that was not given to the Levites. So why should there be, is the question. Deuteronomy 18:1 through 8. The priests, who are Levites, indeed the whole tribe of Levi, are to have no allotment or inheritance with Israel. They shall live on the offerings made to the Lord by fire, for that is their inheritance. They shall have no inheritance among their brothers. The Lord is their inheritance, as he promised them. This is the share due the priest from the people who sacrifice a bull, a sheep, a shoulder, the jowls, and the inner parts. You are to give them the first fruits of your grain, new wine and oil, and the first wool from the shearing of your sheep. For the Lord your God has chosen them and their descendants out of all your tribes to stand and minister in the Lord's name always. If a Levite moves from one of your towns anywhere in Israel where he is living, and comes in all earnestness to the place the Lord will choose, he may minister in the name of the Lord his God, like all his fellow Levites who serve there in the presence of the Lord. He is to share equally in their benefits, even though he has received money from the sale of his family possessions. Why is God so concerned about the Levites? Well, the Levites have no inheritance in the land. They have no place to grow anything. Their job is to minister on behalf of the Lord to the people. People are to share out of their first fruits with the Levites because they minister in the Lord's name. Still true today. Number 5, knowing rightly, 18:9 through 22. The occult practices listed in verses 10 through 11 are not always a sham, but may tap into spiritual forces that are very real and also very dangerous. According to this passage, what good and holy source of revelation has God appointed for Israel? And how does God enable his people to recognize what is truly from him? Deuteronomy 18:9 through 22. When you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, do not learn to imitate the detestable ways of the nations there. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices his son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft, or casts spells, or who is a medium or spiritist, or who consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. And because of these detestable practices, the Lord your God will drive out those nations before you. You must be blameless before the Lord your God. The nations you will dispossess, listen to those who practice sorcery or divination. But as for you, the Lord your God has not permitted you to do so. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your own brothers. You must listen to him, for this is what you asked of the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly when you said, let us not hear the voice of the Lord our God, nor see this great fire anymore, or we will die. In other words, they wanted an intercessor of some kind. The Lord said to me, what they say is good. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brothers, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell them everything I command him. If anyone does not listen to my words, that the prophet speaks in my name, I myself will call him to account. But a prophet who presumes to speak in my name anything I have not commanded him to say, or a prophet who speaks in the name of other gods, must be put to death. You may say to yourselves, how can we know when a message has not been spoken by the Lord, if what a prophet proclaims in the name of the Lord does not take place or come true? There's the test. That is a message the Lord has not spoken. That prophet has spoken presumptuously. Do not be afraid of him. What good and holy source of revelation has God appointed for Israel? How does God enable his people to recognize if it's truly from him? If a prophet speaks and it doesn't come true, don't listen to him. Number 6, the cities of refuge, 19:1 through 13. Moses set apart cities of refuge on the east of the Jordan in Deuteronomy 4:41 through 43. Now he states that 3 more must be selected west of the Jordan once they have entered the land. And he clarifies the purpose of these cities. How do these cities serve the cause of justice? And who is entitled to their protection? So let's read Deuteronomy 19:1 through 13. When the Lord your God has destroyed the nations whose land he is giving you, and when you have driven them out and settled in their towns and houses, then set aside for yourselves 3 cities centrally located in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. Build roads to them and divide into 3 parts the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, so that anyone who kills a man may flee there. These become cities of refuge. This is the rule concerning the man who kills another and flees there to save his life. One who kills his neighbor unintentionally, without malice aforethought. For instance, a man may go into the forest with his neighbor to cut wood, and as he swings his axe to fell a tree, the head may fly off and hit his neighbor and kill him. That man may flee to one of these cities and save his life. Otherwise, the avenger of blood might pursue him in a rage, overtake him if the distance is too great, and kill him even though he is not deserving of death, since he did it to his neighbor without malice aforethought. This is why I command you to set aside for yourselves 3 cities. If the Lord your God enlarges your territory as he promised on oath to your forefathers, and gives you the whole land he promised them, because you carefully follow all these laws I command you today, to love the Lord your God, and to walk always in his ways, then you're to set aside 3 more cities. Do this so that innocent blood will not be shed in your land, which the Lord your God is giving you as your inheritance, and so that you will not be guilty of bloodshed. But if a man hates his neighbor, lies in wait for him, assaults and kills him, and then flees to one of these cities, the elders of the town shall send for him, bring him back from the city, hand him over to the avenger of blood to die. Show no pity on him. You must purge from Israel the guilt of shedding innocent blood, so that it may go well with you. Do not move your neighbor's boundary stones set up by your predecessors in the inheritance you receive in the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess. So how do these cities serve the cause of justice, and who is entitled to their protection? The innocent, those who cause a death by accident, are protected by these cities, but not so for the known murderer, the one who has malice aforethought, who determines to kill someone and murders them. And finally, number 7, warfare far and near, chapter 20, verses 1 through 20, which I believe is the entire chapter. It says this chapter divides into 3 sections. First and the third sections prescribe laws for warfare in all contexts, while the second section distinguishes between war against peoples far away and war against peoples close by. While the destruction that the Lord authorizes in this passage may alarm us, the purpose here is to curb sin and injustice. How do these laws curb sin and injustice? Deuteronomy chapter 20. When you go to war against your enemies and see horses and chariots and an army greater than yours, do not be afraid of them, because the Lord your God who brought you up out of Egypt will be with you. When you are about to go into battle, the priest shall come forward and address the army. He shall say, Hear, O Israel, today you are going into battle against your enemies. Do not be faint-hearted or afraid. Do not be terrified or give way to panic before them. For the Lord your God is the one who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to give you victory. The officer shall say to the army, Has anyone built a new house and not dedicated it? Let him go home, or he may die in battle and someone else may dedicate it. Has anyone planted a vineyard and not begun to enjoy it? Let him go home, or he may die in battle and someone else may enjoy it. Has anyone become pledged to a woman and not married her? Let him go home, or he may die in battle and someone else may marry her. Then the officer shall add, Is any man afraid or faint-hearted? Let him go home, so that his brothers will not become disheartened too. When the officers have finished speaking to the army, they shall appoint commanders over it. Verse 10. When you march up to attack a city, make its people an offer of peace. If they accept and open their gates, all the people in it shall be subject to forced labor and shall work for you. If they refuse to make peace and they engage you in battle, lay siege to that city. When the Lord your God delivers it into your hand, put to the sword all the men who are in it. As for the women, the children, the livestock, and everything else in the city, you may take these as plunder for yourselves, and you may use the plunder the Lord your God gives you from your enemies. This is how you are to treat all the cities that are at a distance from you and do not belong to nations nearby. However, in the cities of the nations the Lord your God has given you as an inheritance, do not leave anything that breathes. Completely destroy them, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, as the Lord your God has commanded you. Otherwise, your God has commanded you. Otherwise, they will teach you to follow all the detestable things they do in worshiping their gods, and you will sin against the Lord your God. When you lay siege to a city for a long time, fighting against it to capture it, do not destroy its trees by putting an axe to them, because you can eat their fruit. Do not cut them down. Are the trees of the field people, that you should besiege them? However, you may cut down trees that you know are not fruit trees, and use them to build siege works until the city at war with you fails or falls. So while the destruction that the Lord authorizes in this passage may alarm us, the purpose here is to curb sin and injustice. How do these laws curb sin and injustice? If the people of the land you're entering offer peace, they may become subject to you. If they do not, destroy everything except fruit-bearing trees. God lays it out pretty plain and simple, doesn't he? If you're watching this and you haven't been a part of this study, there's a whole lot that we've talked about all this destruction and murder that is good knowledge and information and discussion to have. That if you're just watching this as a one-off study, there's some of that would be helpful, but don't have time for that right here, right now. Come to Sunday school. Number 8, unsolved murder, chapter 29, verses 1 through 9. This is the last text for today. It says, wicked deeds done in secret do not escape the Lord's notice. Innocent blood cries out to him and threatens to bring his judgment upon Israel. When no murderer can be found for a slain person, who bears the responsibility of atoning for the crime? And how do they accomplish this atonement? Chapter 21 of Deuteronomy, verses 1 through 9. If a man is found slain, lying in a field in the land that the Lord your God has given you to possess, and it is not known who killed him, your elders and judges shall go out and measure the distance from the body to the neighboring towns. Then the elders of the town nearest the body shall take a heifer that has never worked and has never worn a yoke, and lead her down to a valley that has not been plowed or planted, and where there is a flowing stream. There in the valley, they are to break the heifer's neck. The priests, the sons of Levi, shall step forward, for the Lord your God has chosen them to minister and to pronounce blessings in the name of the Lord, and to decide all cases of dispute and assault. Then all the elders of the town nearest the body shall wash their hands over the heifer whose neck was broken in the valley. And they shall declare, our hands did not shed this blood, nor did our eyes see it done. Accept this atonement for your people Israel, whom you have redeemed. O Lord, and do not hold your people guilty of the blood of an innocent man, and the bloodshed will be atoned for. So you will purge from yourselves the guilt of shedding innocent blood, since you have done what is right in the eyes of the Lord. When no murderer can be found of a slain person, who bears the responsibility of atoning for the crime, and how do they accomplish this? Well, the town nearest the dead body is responsible to atone for that death. So they must get a heifer, one that's never worked or anything, so a young heifer, and take it down into the valley where there is a stream of water nearby, and they're to break its neck, and everyone in the town is to wash their hands over that now dead heifer, and they're to say that they are innocent of shedding that blood, and then that murder is atoned for. Well, that's the end of all the scriptures. And then we have the gospel glimpses. I'll just read you some of those things on page 61. Deuteronomy 18:15 through 19, we see how the Lord will continue to speak to Israel. After Moses' death, he will raise up a prophet like Moses, who will speak on God's behalf. These prophets, Moses included, minister the old covenant, which convicts Israel of their sin, but lacks the power to overcome sin's tyranny. And therefore, Paul calls their ministry a ministry of death. For this reason, Moses and the prophets point beyond themselves to Christ, the prophet specifically spoken of in Deuteronomy 18:18. Christ is the climatic revelation of God and is himself God, mediating a new and better covenant. When Christ appears on the Mount of Transfiguration with Moses and Elijah, the two great prophets of the Old Covenant, God the Father identifies Christ as the prophet who was to come, who is more than a servant, being God's very own Son. And God urges us, in the words of Deuteronomy 18:15, listen to him. Jesus is the true judge, priest, and king. Jesus not only embodies all that God envisioned the prophets, but also the true judge, priest, and king. As the great judge, he will dispense true, impartial judgment on the last day. As the great priest, he offered the one true atoning sacrifice in addition to fulfilling all of the responsibilities of the Levites. And as the great king, he does not devote himself to the lust of the flesh, but treasures the law in his heart. Those are gospel glimpses looking forward toward the New Testament. Whole Bible connections throughout the whole Bible. How does this connect? It talks about failed kingship. The kings of Israel will face terrible temptation to use their authority for themselves, selfishly hoarding military power, money, and wives. We can't imagine ever anything like that happening, can we? If they succumb, they will become exploiters rather than servants. It's not surprising then to read Solomon's apostasy later in life. For all these counterfeit gods, and especially his wives, led him astray. Let us therefore seek not to be deluded into making empty idols our hope, for the Lord alone is the wellspring of life. And then theological soundings talks about balanced justice. A key concern of justice is balanced redress for wrongs incurred. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Since the punishment is inflicted by the state, not by individuals, the possibility of one brother striking another, followed by the other striking back, is avoided. With the punishment imposed by God-given authorities, the matter is resolved. And then my own notes I put under gospel glimpses, the prophet, Moses, and those who would follow decide cases of life and death. But Jesus, who is the true prophet, decides all cases eternally of life and death forever. Whole Bible connections, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Sounds like Spider-Man, but it's biblical. It is hard to be in authority without it going to your head, without taking in all the riches that come along with it, all the perks and the privileges. And then theological soundings, my note, we need to look to God for true justice, which was given out the moment that Jesus was crucified. So I hope you have enjoyed this study. Next week will be week number 9, page 65. And we'll look forward to seeing you and continuing our study in Deuteronomy. God bless you.